Okay, well, we got everything set up finally. Um, all right. So, welcome back. First official video lecture online whatchamahoos for psych adjustment. Um, Spring 2020. And first of all, your students do want to apologize for the delays in getting this up and running. Um, Obviously, your illustrious instructor is not the most tech savvy outside of setting up video games, so apologize for the delays. Um, with that being said, I am extending the homework due date for this first online week to next Sunday, uh, which is the 12th, and also giving an extra week for this week's assignment as well, just out of simple giving you extra time, a lot of flexibility. Um, Part of the homework assignments and some of the email correspondence I've got from you guys already has been talking about wanting some flexibility, going easy on you guys, and I agree. So, uh, forum posts, I'm really going to be kind of a hard line on, make sure that you're getting those done. First post by Thursday of the week, and replying to a couple of your peers by midnight of Sunday. Um, those are just because I do want to encourage some level of as close to real time as we can realistically get, given the circumstances. I know some instructors are requiring people like attend video Zoom lecture meetings during when we used to normally meet, and I'm not planning on doing that. Given that some of you are now laid off and have kids at home or other obligations, caring for elderly parents, that whole jazz. I just don't see it realistic to expect you to be able to do, some of that stuff on top of working around different schedules and maintaining old lecture times. So that's why we're doing video, um, forum posting, and then, of course, keeping our weekly assignments. And just as I'm going to try and be flexible and kind and go easy on you guys, if you can do the same, I appreciate that. Do that with each other, with me. Check in with each other. Make sure that if you are in contact with some of your peers, especially for the electrical maintenance program students, check in, make sure that they're, you know, up to date, keeping up with their classes online. It's been kind of posted through the powers that be. There's not going to be any sort of um, refund if you try to drop your classes at this point. You guys are expected to continue on. So make sure that you help each other stay accountable and up to date with your homework, with your readings, as much as you can with the videos. Given my problems that I've been having here, getting that going. We're all wearing multiple hats right now. Like I said, some people have more work, especially for the folks in the nursing homes, work in hospitals, other essential services, myself included. As you all know, I am a full time therapist, only part time instructors. So, on top of transitioning classes to online, there's been a lot of fun stuff transitioning, my therapy practice to going towards telehealth and all that, family obligations. So we're all wearing multiple hats. Do your best and keep in contact as much as you can. If you haven't already, make sure you're logging into your HCC emails. That's going to be my direct way of contacting you and our official way of keeping in touch. That is actually going to the website, going into the Outlook login, not the email login through D2L itself. If you're using personal email to contact me, know that any of the weekly email type of stuff that I send out, that's still going to be going to your HCC email. So it's important that you log into that. Um, Homework's going to remain weekly. Um, like I said, a little bit of flexibility these first couple weeks here just because of my snafus and everything. but make sure that you're using proper grammar. Answering incomplete sentences, don't using emojis, anything of that sort, and spell check. Um, Still going over and grading some of the midterm papers and some of the other backlogged homework. Gonna have a little bit of better time to go through and check all that stuff out now. So by the end of this week, expect a direct email from me with your current grades. I'll also let you know the dates of any class periods from before going online that we missed. So if you haven't done any of the makeup extra assignments to get credit for that, no, you can still do that. Um, but make sure that you get it done sooner rather than later. We are at a month and a half left of the semester, so it's going to creep up pretty quick. On top of, I'm sure with all your other classes, you're already kind of overloaded with a lot of work to get done. So the longer you wait, the more work you're going to have, and it's just not going to be so fun. Um, with the forum posting, once again, um, make your primary post by Thursday at midnight, and then reply to two of your peers by midnight of Sunday. Um, Make sure that you're being respectful of everybody's viewpoints, use in proper grammar, proper language. I don't want any cussing, no emojis, none of that. Treat this just like you would any other professional assignment, correspondence. Keep it civil. If you have any problems with anybody being disrespectful or anything, do email me. Um, I'm only able to check the forums a couple times a week. So if something's going down that's not okay with you, you gotta alert me to it. Otherwise, it may take me a little while to get to it and address it. Although, after having worked with you guys for most of the semester, I don't foresee any of that being a problem. Um, yeah, and final update with everything too is do know there will be another final paper um, that will be released later on, closer to the end. It'll give you about 2 weeks to work on it. It'll be another 2 to 3 page paper, and it's going to be literally on what you got out of the class or what you didn't like out of it. So you're not going to have to do any extra research or anything. It's going to be all your viewpoint. So shouldn't be too tough to get done, and that'll come up later. But just another important reason to stay up to date with everything else and get your makeup stuff done ahead of time instead of waiting for it. Um, let's see. In terms of office hour type of stuff, contact me. I'm pretty flexible with the way that we can keep in touch. Zoom, Skype, Discord, my direct personal phone line if need be, or we can even use my Doxy account that I use at my other job if need be. Pretty flexible, have a fair amount of availability, but you need to set that up ahead of time with me. Give me at least 2 days. Um, can possibly do it with one day prior, but prefer two. And then Fridays, I'm gonna try and set up a Zoom meeting that'll be just kind of like open office. Right now, I'm looking at doing noon to 2 o'clock on Fridays, and have it set up so if you need to talk with me, want to chat with your classmates, you can just hop on into that call. Um, Once again, if you want something more private, more one-on-one, make sure that you arrange that ahead of time with me. Okay. With that being said, let's get to the actual material here. Um, on top of the article that I gave you for the weekly assignment, do expect other readings in the future. Make sure that you're trying them out. If there's a word that you don't understand, you have the power of Google. Look it up. Use a dictionary. Use online encyclopedias. They're out there. Try and be a little resourceful with that and apply yourself first. If you still don't get some of the concepts, email me with a specific question. If you're going to say something to the effect of, like, this whole thing didn't make sense, or there's a lot of big words I didn't understand, that's not going to be really helpful. I'm not going to read the article for you, so make sure that if you don't understand something and you need further help, that you email specific questions, specific parts of the readings, okay? Also for today, just for the sake of citation, this isn't going to be anything that you need to write down or do any extra reading on, but just for the sake of citation, some of what I am going to be grabbing from is from the first chapter of American Families in Crisis by Jeffrey Turner. So there we go. Consider that the citation. Um, so article that I gave you was talking about disasters. COVID is, we can largely at this point consider to be a disaster. Um, it's something that we haven't seen this scope of illness really in terms of mainstream, in terms of unified effort and seriousness since the Spanish flu in 1918. There are some parallels to when HIV/AIDS was first hitting the scenes and the later part of the 1900s here. But really, the absolute scope and the speed and immediacy hasn't been hit since like 1918. So we're going to kind of treat that as a disaster. The article that I gave you talked about two types of disasters and kind of mental health responses, how we study and look at them in terms of adjustment. So the two types are going to be natural and man-made disasters. Natural being things like earthquakes, volcanoes, storms, hurricanes, disease, pestilence, if you really want to get dramatic with the terminology there, or man made, so economic impacts, war, famine, that sort of stuff. Um, Generally speaking, we do tend to look at these almost less from the individual perspective and more at family units, household units, communities at large. And going forward with that, so just everything that we talked about today, just know that we can kind of apply it to those whole units and we look at systematic issues more so than the independent. Um, in terms of disaster and crisis, we put we have several different spots and topics that we kind of look into and apply this towards. Biochemical, so we're talking about straight up nutritional stuff, environmental factors, sunlight, that kind of stuff. Social, so things like as little as like noise and crowding. Um, People going into refugee shelters, going into storm shelters, Hurricane Katrina, when people would be going into very cramped and in some cases underprepared areas. That is the stressor that gets put into disaster situations that can be quite, in some cases, dangerous. Um, Psychological, so we're looking at overall things like anxiety, depression, anger, that more emotional component to it. And then because we have to have psych on everything to make it more confusing, but we have psychosocial. So we're looking at aspects such as loss of jobs, loss of economic opportunity, recreational opportunity, kind of the a little bit existential stuff, but more so loss of your economics, loss of family members, of friends, the actual loss of life. Um, then we also have philosophical. So this is going to be the true heart of the existential aspects of things. So, how is your value system really working? Is it being challenged? Are your spiritual views being challenged in light of the disaster? Um, are you suffering from a lack of purpose? Kind of not knowing. In previous lectures, when we were still meeting face to face, I talked about anomie. This is going to be another spot that, if you, when you're looking through the philosophical lens, is that person experiencing something where they have no frame of reference, nothing has prepared them for this moment, and they're completely lost. And then finally, we have the endemic factors. So that's looking at the lens of like your long-term stressors or long-term things that have already been present. So chronic illness, change of overall environment, long-term disasters. So things like radiation fallout or If a wildfire wipes out a forest, maybe there's some desertification, changes in the economic opportunity at large for that. That's a permanent aspect. Um, when we're taking things and we're applying them a little bit more to the family setting, there are three kinds of classification of crisis that we can give. So there's developmental, or what we would also call normative crises. These are changes, transition points that are pretty predictable. They're expected to happen, they're normal, and usually families can get through them without too much outside assistance and usually come out a little bit better. They achieve what we call equilibrium in the family. Things are harmonious, a little bit easier, and comes out stronger in the end. So we're looking at things like birth of child, child entering school, graduation, moving out, college, retirement of a family member, another family member maybe getting married, more people entering or leaving the house, even things like getting a pet. Stuff that you can kind of plan for ahead of time and see it happening can add some stress to the family. Retirement, for instance, is one that creates a lot of existential crisis for folks, especially for folks up here on the Iron Range. If you worked in the mines your whole life, did a lot of shift work, and basically lived to provide for your family, maybe go hunting in winter, but otherwise just worked all the time with the plan to enjoy life after you retire. You hit retirement, and suddenly you're in crisis because you don't know your role in the family. The family's maybe entering a little bit of crisis because there's this kind of readjustment period of, okay, breadwinner's back in the home. Maybe there was a stay-at-home spouse. Maybe there's a child or two still in the household in high school or college, and the natural order of the family, for lack of better terms, is kind of thrown in upheaval for a little while. Um, that's going to be one of those crises that you could say are normative. It might take some time for the family to figure out, for that individual to figure it out, but usually that person comes out fine on the other end and the family's stronger for it. There's just a little bit of adjustment of the roles. Um, and then, of course, if we have normative crises, then we have to have non-normative crises. We also call these situational. So they're going to be unpredictable events, such as loss of a family member, if the family's a victim of crime, somebody loses their job, natural disaster, domestic violence, house fires, anything of that sort that you just don't plan for, right? You don't go out and say, hey, it's almost noon on Monday. I think I'm going to go out and get robbed, and we're going to be completely planned for what we do after this. No, you don't do that. Um, so once again, same thing. We're looking at how the system, family system, is going to be impacted, what kind of role changes are going to happen, and what resources are at play, and how long it takes for the family to recover. Now, the last one is we told is called traumatic crisis, um, and this is when we have a non-normative crisis that's either extended in duration, whether that's the active event of the crisis is going on for a long time, or the effects of the crisis are going on for a long time, or it doesn't have to have a longer duration, but the effects have to be extreme. Um, so these type of things have, on top of being long lasting, they have a permanency of their effect. So where a person losing their job is a non-normative crisis that might be short-term in duration. Um, COVID maybe wipes out, the hospitality industry for a full season, for maybe a year, whatever. Something extreme, long-lasting that can be considered more of a traumatic crisis. So, traumatic crisis is going to be duration and intensity is going to be more extreme, intense than regular run-of-the-mill non-normative crisis. And in all of these, um, certain factors play into it that we observe in terms of trying to study and get a handle on just the overall impact and the resiliency and protective or non-protective factors for the family unit. So we're going to be looking at the amount of time that the family is given to prepare. Hurricanes, maybe we know like a week in advance that the hurricane is coming, so the family has a little bit more time to prepare. But maybe something like a house fire, if that family doesn't have like homeowners insurance or something, they're not really going to have any time to prepare. Um, the amount of guidance that the family has. Um, are there many people within that cultural or social unit that have experienced a similar crisis or have gone through something else or have the tools or knowledge to help that individual out? um, Even if that person or resources exist within the social network, do does that family unit after the crisis hits, do they have access to that person on a readily available basis? um, the kind of sort of unifying theme with a lot of these is that if it's limited to the family in scope, it's being experienced by a few. So we look at how many people are impacted, and that can give either a feeling of isolation or a feeling of camaraderie. Um, so this is both the experience of, do a lot of people physically and in reality have they experienced this? What's the pool that we're working with? Or when we're looking at a specific family or community, is there the perception that there's a limited amount of people experiencing this? Folks who right now are socially isolating, if they don't have access to the internet or computer or the skills to engage with that, and if they don't have a lot of folks that they can call up and safely communicate with, even though there's a lot of us going through the social isolating, the realigning of this experience, there is that isolation, and it can create that perception of very few people are going through it, or at least very few people from the household or the family unit standpoint. Um, yeah, limited experience with events. Once again, if we're looking at what's going on right now, unless you're 102, you probably don't have a lot of experience with an event like this. If you were GLBT or substance user in like the 80s or 90s, when the height of the and freshness of the HIV was around, you may have a little bit of experience similar to this and have a little bit of ability and know how to navigate versus somebody that's maybe was born in 1990 or wasn't didn't experience anything like that. Um, then you have the time frame, and we look at the unknowns with this. How does the impact of knowledge of time frame work? And we're looking at both the knowledge of how long is the current event going to be lasting and impacting, and how long is the expected recovery time going to take. Those are both impacts that we look at. So something like the hurricane is going to last maybe a week or so for the active event. Then the recovery after that may take years. Maybe it'll only take a few months. Maybe that family has the means to relocate to another family member that's in a safer area. So we look at that recovery time and active time of the event. Then there is we look at the sense of lack of control and helplessness, both from the reality of the means of the family to address the situation and the sensation of helplessness. How is that impacting? There are going to be times where maybe the family does have the means to address it, but the perception of the world around them, the maybe limitedness to affect the greater structural change of their community, may institute a feeling of helplessness, and that can kind of contribute to the sense of the crisis. Um, we have the disruption and destruction factors. Once again, changes to the family roles. They can be permanent versus change were change in cases of like normative crisis In a normative crisis, you're going to recover, you're going to reorientate, and kind of settle back into family roles. They may be a little bit changed or modified, but they're going to be there. In traumatic crisis, we look at what roles have been wiped out, what roles are destroyed or no longer available within a reasonable amount of time for the family. Um, then you have the factor of the sense of loss, that kind of grieving aspect. All all disaster, all crisis, all of that has some level of grieving and loss. So we look at how the individual's coping with that and what skills they've got for that. And then we have all the other emotional impact. So these are going to be your anxieties, your anger, depression, or is that person or family unit able to reorientate? Maybe they have a strong gratitude response, so that they're thankful for being alive, for having each other, having whatever is available to them. What is that emotional cost? All these kind of lead up to resiliency, which is whether we're looking at a community, a family unit, an individual. Resiliency is your ability to bounce back, recover, and maintain yourself during crisis or other stressful events. Um, so, kind of the factors that we look at with that are going to be things like communication skills. Are Is this person going through an event able to communicate their needs? Are they able to navigate conflict well? Are they able to negotiate for what they need or what they've lost? Um, that plain old ability to communicate. And being communication skill, you can have that. And it can be great, but we're also looking at how does that change in the face of stress. Um, there's the resilience factor of your physical resources. Do you have the basic needs covered? Do you have the means to acquire food, water, shelter, clothing? Does this person feel like they have enough? Um, or do they need to go out and buy 10 to 20 cases of toilet paper to feel secure? How are their skills with kind of rationing that out, being able to use food sources that maybe they don't normally use? We see this a lot with as a problem with folks who go to things like food shelves. They may have access to food itself, but they may not have the skill and knowledge to cook with it. If you give somebody something like dried beans or lentils or chickpeas and they have no idea how to cook with it, how to work with it, no cultural sense for it, it creates a barrier. So even though they have physical access to the food, they don't necessarily have access to consume it easily. And that becomes a negative factor for them. Another aspect of resiliency is going to be your social and cultural capital. Who do you know? Who can you approach or feel like you can approach? Who's in your community that you're allowed to approach or even view as somebody that's got knowledge? Um, or who can guide you? Um, the other aspect is going to be, do you even have the knowledge or ability to ask certain questions, seek out resources, um, and are these individuals currently available? Then you have the adaptability of coping skills, and this goes again along the lines of the communication skills, but we're focusing here more so on the aspect of, can you do grounding? Can you do distraction? The 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, like I had you do in a past lecture. Are you able to positive reframe? Are you able to externalize your symptoms in the face of these stressors or traumatic responses or disasters, crisis, however you want to phrase that? Do these skills work for you when this is going on? And are you still able to use them when you're under duress? Then finally, your attitude, acceptance, and gratitude of what's going on. Family units and individuals, the attitude and the perspective that's taken towards the crisis event or the disaster can have a major impact on the way that your resiliency is going to play out. You may have all the skills under the sun, you may have all the resources under the sun, You may have that fallout shelter well stocked with food to last you 1,000 years, but if your perception, your perspective get in the way of accessing that from a mental standpoint, from a social standpoint, they might as well not even exist at that point, and that becomes a major detriment and risk factor for the family involved. Um, so those are some of those factors that we're going to be looking at when we talk about disaster, when we talk about crisis, when you read that article. Um, but we also tend to look at disaster and crisis from a policy response. What policies are working? What policies are bad? Um, so, like, if we were to take COVID and some of the responses going on, state of Minnesota, the governor is putting a lot of effort and direction into refurbishing old buildings, unused buildings to try and increase hospital staffing and bed availability to better handle the crisis. The stay-at-home order to prevent the further spread. Those are kind of good policies. Um, Negative policies would be something that we'd also look at, or more precise speaking, would be policies that are going to end with a negative outcome. So some states have been looking at possibly, in addition to closing non-essential services, at banning alcohol sales. We know from past policies and from physical health capabilities and what's going on right now, if you ban alcohol sales, you're going to end up with folks who have active addiction to it, active dependence on it, going into withdrawal. And what you know from the lecture that we had before spring break, if you go into withdrawal from alcohol, that can be dangerous and outright deadly. And that effectively can add extra stress to the family units, to the community units, and right now, more than ever, the biggest negative impact would be hospitals that are overtaxed because of COVID can also be seeing an influx of people going through active withdrawal. So we're adding stress to the medical systems. So when we talk about disaster, and especially in terms of adjustment, we're also looking into those aspects of what policy is coming out of this and how does it affect and impact a community's ability to adjust, the family unit and the individual's unit ability to adjust um, adaptively or maladaptively to what's going on. As I said earlier, we can view disaster as grief events. There's a lot of loss that's actively happening. So we have the the more typical, the more what we usually go to when we think of grief and loss, the loss of life, um, which is apparent. We do have people dying from COVID, from other diseases, and that creates the grief process. But we also have other forms of loss when disasters happen. We have the loss of freedom, right? Right now, the stay-at-home order is saying, you really shouldn't be going out unless, it's essential. You have to get groceries, medical support, whatever. Um, we have the loss of what could have been. I know some of you have been talking about losing out on job opportunities, or at least job opportunities being delayed. Loss of children's activities, of sports games, and other stuff of that nature. The loss of recreation, the loss of being able to achieve, at least in the short term, personal goals, the loss of family time, the loss of physical connection with others, the loss of your job, the loss of attending your graduation. I mean, for many of you, you are first generation students, and that marks an incredibly important aspect of your college experience. For some, that can be a profound piece of joy, satisfaction, pride for the family. Those are all forms of loss, and they need to be treated as such. When we treat grief, when we treat loss with the capacity, with the credence it deserves, It lets us create a framework to more easily address it, to better adjust to it, and reorientate. You have the period of the actual loss, you have the period of experiencing the mourning, and then you have that reorientation period where you kind of readjust to the world, um, and come out either stronger or in a worse off position, or maybe you come out just the same. But you go through that reorientation period, and to get there, it can help to set up this as that form of grief and loss. Now, it's incredibly important and positive health for adjustment in the psych, and we have study after study that shows this, but viewing grief as a comparative or a competitive, or one form of grief being more legitimate over another, that is destructive, that is toxic, and it's non-productive. We do not compete with different kinds of grief. Treat every grief as it's important to the individual. When we tend to have that comparative grief, people tend to dismiss their own grieving process and their own emotional state, their own feelings, and they don't actually adjust, they don't recover, they don't treat what needs to be treated. That leads to rather risky, rather negative outcomes in the long run. So make sure as you're going forward with this, as you're kind of keeping up with the readings, as you're maybe addressing certain media articles, whatever, that you do not have comparative grief. Um, in terms of even handling this kind of loss, in terms of adjusting to what's going on, I mean, there's very important things that we all need to do. The social distancing is one. If you have to leave the house, make sure you're 6 to 8 feet away, if not further from each other. Um, Make sure that you're only leaving the house if you're going to the grocery store. Try to make it one trip once a week. Cut down on how often you're going out. If you're feeling ill, try to, if it's appropriate, use the e-visits through Essentia and Fairview, St. Luke's. Most places now have some form of telehealth where you use either your smartphone or your webcam from home to have your appointment with the doctor, so that you're narrowing down how much exposure you're getting. Make sure that you are leaving the house. Though it's okay to go for a walk. Just make sure you're maintaining that social distancing. Um, Make sure you're checking in with your friends, with your family members, with your colleagues, your peers, but do it through either the phone, through Skype, Discord, Zoom, any of those forms of communication. That disconnect, whether we're talking about your own health, my health, or even just studying disaster and adjustment in general, disconnect is a major risk factor for negative outcomes. And that is one thing that's currently a major challenge for some folks. Once again, not everybody has access to the internet or the skills or the technical knowledge to make that stuff work. So make sure that you're calling and checking in with friends and family, especially the elderly. Um, Make sure that you're giving yourself kind of time and credence to feel what you're feeling. For those of you who are essential workers, this can be a frightening time. It can be a stressful time. You might be working more hours or you might be working fewer hours. Your schedule may be unstable. For parents, having your children at home and trying to help out with that distance learning schedule now. This is all uncharted territory for a lot of people. So make sure that you're experiencing and you're working on that self compassion, that self kindness. Um, if you find yourself checking a lot of information on COVID, make sure that you're really limiting how much time and what sources you're using. The CDC, the World Health Organization, the governor, and the state medical director once a day are given updates. If you find yourself spending a lot of time looking into updates and worrying about the extent of this, where it's preventing you from maybe getting stuff done around the house, getting your homework done, maybe you're spending more time worrying and looking into this stuff, make sure that you give yourself some hard limits to how much you're looking into. Close the laptop, shut down Facebook, turn the TV off, put away the newspaper, and say maybe once in the morning for 10 minutes you look into it, maybe once in the evening for 10 minutes you look into it, but limit how much that you're of this information you're getting and try to limit it to only what's pertinent. It's important to not try to externally control stuff or run with information. If the CDC gives you recommendations, don't try to do things like project or conjecture what else maybe you should be doing. That can lead to kind of an over response or increase that stress reaction. Um, Recognizing that the fear is okay, it's normal, and we're in this kind of reorientating period of looking for normalcy. When psychologists, when therapists take place in crisis counseling after natural disasters, one of the biggest things that we do, one of the biggest things that we focus on is establishing that it's okay to feel afraid and it's okay to try and seek out normalcy. And that there are times where reminding folks that taking a shower, making breakfast, it's okay. And sometimes that's all you need, especially for parents. Parents who are affected by this oftentimes will sacrifice their own well being because they don't want to take away from their kids, or if people are caring for elderly or otherly disabled family members and friends, they don't take care of themselves because they feel a certain sense of guilt. Make sure that you take care of yourself, that you're trying to stick to a routine, that you're finding those ways to inject that normalcy. If you have a certain way of dressing when you get ready for work or for your school day, even though you're not attending classes in person anymore, maintain that. If you're the type of person that makes their bed first thing in the morning, it's going to be important that you maintain that as well. Any way that you can maintain that normal aspect of your life, it can add to that level of normalcy, which increases your protective factors. So, with that, I'm going to just rattle off here a list of resources. Um, and I will try and post this at some point in the D2L, but just know that this is not exhaustive, but it's some of the stuff here in northern Minnesota that we do have available to us. So if need be, or if you've got somebody else in need, take advantage of it. So we have a really neat service in northern St. Louis County. It's a mobile crisis team operated by Range Mental Health Center. And if you're in kind of a crisis where you don't necessarily need to go to the hospital, maybe you don't feel like you're in imminent danger to yourself, but you need somebody for mental health, you can call them. They'll talk with you, and maybe a little bit different now with COVID going on, but in the past they've been able to send teams out to meet people where they're at. I don't know for sure if they're still doing that or not right now, but really good resource that's operated 24/7. And that who you would call for that is the mobile crisis team at 218-288-2100. They're a 24/7 service for northern St. Louis County. Um, Southern St. Louis County, I believe, has a different outfit that works for them, as does Itasca County. For if you want that information, I would recommend going to the State Board of Health. They, I believe, have a directory of all the crisis teams in the state. Um, Ruby's Pantry continues to operate. They just have a restricted way of doing it, and I believe it's kind of a drive-through service now. The Chisholm Food Shelf is still going. If you are self-employed or a 1099 worker, the Freelancers Union, they have kind of a nonprofit advocacy branch, and they do have a small grant to help people out who've been negatively impacted financially from that. I think the most you can get if you get it is like $1,000, but Anything helps. Um, if you're a business owner, or in the near future here, I believe too is opening up disaster loans. Um, if you've been laid off or if you're currently unemployed, um, Minnesota has kind of fast tracked the unemployment process. So you can go online now and apply for that. And I believe if you need any extra assistance for that, I think they have specific days of the week based on what the last number of your social security number is. Um, but go ahead and contact them, get on it right away. If you are currently uninsured in Minnesota, we're under a special enrollment period with MNsure. The governor signed an executive order a little while back. So if you are uninsured, you can reapply and try and get a state plan or at least a subsidized plan. Very important that you do that sooner rather than later. That I don't remember the exact date the 30 days started, but you don't have a full 30 days anymore. But if you need health insurance, that's available to you now. Um, like I said earlier, St. Luke's, Essentia, Fairview, most of the major medical systems now have a form of visit over the web. And what exactly they can do, I'm not 100% sure, but if it's not immediate, like, urgent care type of thing, you can avoid some of that physical contact and exposure risk by just doing an online visit with one of their doctors through that. Um, for your students here, if you need mental health care, if you need therapy, or if you just need somebody to chat with, our counseling department is still active. So Donna Gretham, Jillian Rostow, you can email them, you can call their department and set up an appointment with them. I don't believe they're doing face to face, but I believe they are set up to be able to do Zoom sessions with you or talk to you over the phone. But you would want to call or email them directly, and they can help you out with that. On campus, there is at least one of the computer labs still is open with limited availability. So if you do have some technical problems, if your computer breaks down, or if you don't have the best internet at home, you do have the opportunity to go onto campus if need be. And I would say probably want to make that your last option just to limit your exposure, but it is there. Um, Check your HCC email. The campus has sent out some information in a prior email about that. And then your local churches, your community organizations, a lot of them are having some smaller efforts, whether that's food assistance or just being able to reach out and chat. A lot of the churches are going to having services online. Limited things like their smaller group meetings are online. There's some AA, NA, Al-Anon meetings that have gone to an online format as well. So check up with if you use any of those sources. Check with your contact person and see what they're doing, and if that's something that they're currently offering or planning to offer. And then finally, no matter where you live in the States, if you have a resource need or if you're going through a non emergency crisis, you can always dial 211 or go to the 211 website, and that'll connect you with your local United Way, and they can help you with a plethora of stuff from food assistance to medical to mental health to housing. If they can't help you directly, they know who to connect you with. So, with that, we're just about at 50 minutes here. Once again, if you have any questions on the materials, send me an email. Keep in touch, and um, yeah, hopefully this is going to work for everybody. We're surviving a few of the kinks of this transition, so bear with me, and I will try and be as flexible with you as well. So, yeah, contact me as needed. Otherwise, have a good one.